Well, welcome everyone. I am so glad to be here at our webinar for our bridging, or actually our resilience team with ESSDACK. And I am so lucky and happy that I get to be here today with Emily Daniels. Everybody say hey to Emily. I know you don't get to say hey, but Emily, say hey to everybody.
Hey, everybody.
This is our actual second episode of putting this this live webinar together, and I didn't get to participate in the first one because I was out of state working, and now the second one, everybody else is working. I'm still out of state. I'm in Iowa right now on the road, but Emily, you're in New Hampshire, right?
I am, where there's lots of snow.
I was going to say your outside probably looks a little whiter than this one, though, right?
Yes, totally. Mm-hmm.
That's all right. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm really thankful for the miracles, the magic of technology to be able to connect our brains and hearts together today, and then to share this with other people who are either watching us live or watching us later on down the road, and picking up the bits of wisdom that I know you'll be laying down for us here in a little bit. So thanks for being here. So we have a 20-minute show that we want to put together for folks, and so I know that the other members of my team are pretty well. They know I can kind of go off onto a tangent sometimes, so I want to make sure that I stick pretty close to our format with what we're doing here. And our first segment that we always want to get into is really starting out our conversations with a little bit of gratitude. So what is it that we are grateful for today, right here in this moment? And so if you're watching live, or even if you're watching later, you can go ahead and type so that you can share that with us, and we'll be participating. But Emily, let's you and me share some things here. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first?
No, I was thinking about this because I feel completely honored and just fortunate, I guess that's the word, to be able to even do this work. It's heart work for me, and when I connect with folks like you guys, I just feel this magnetism and this energy that lets me know that this is like my intended purpose at this point in time. And so I'm grateful that we can have a conversation about this. I have mad respect for ESSDACK and the work that you all are doing there in Kansas and elsewhere, and it's just great to be able to do this for a living.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I know we didn't compare notes on this, but I'm kind of a similar sort of thing. I'm grateful to be part of the ESSDACK team and get to know people at a different level, not just people like you, Emily, who are out there and have been doing this work both in schools and in communities broader than schools, and nationally, internationally with your work as well. But to know people in everyday classrooms and everyday communities from a different level. You know, I've been in education now for 26 years and working with folks and delivering content. And this work, it asks us to be a little bit different with one another. A little more open, a little more vulnerable, a little more real, and a lot more honest. And it's hard for me, and knowing, of course, a little bit how I grew up. But when I get to be that way with other people, and other people share that with me, I'm so grateful in the world with that. So anyway, mush moment. I can be okay with that. I can be okay. So if anybody else out there watching, I would love to hear your statements of gratitude. I might, from time to time, if I look over to the side here, y'all, I'm looking at my phone because we're going live here, and I want to see if people are sharing things, and I want to make sure that this is actually live and participatory, so I'm not ignoring. I neglected to do a really decent at all introduction, other than saying you're in New Hampshire, and people are like, so if they don't know who you are, I think it's really important. So let me do a better job at introducing. Hi, you don't know? I thought we all knew each other. So originally, in a previous life, you were a high school counselor, and then shifted a little bit into different other fields. And now you're officially, I think your title is a social entrepreneur, where you're doing good things for the world with that. You're as an entrepreneur, you are the founder and host owner of the hearthisnow.org. And when I say here, I want to know more about the here, HERE is how it's spelled. Hear This Now. I really love that. And I know that a lot of people will think it's here with the ears. But doing work across the country in education, in healthcare, in human services such as mental health and addiction recovery. And you've been doing this work deeply. And when I got introduced to your work, mine's blown a little bit, right? And reaching out to get to actually talk to you in real life, there's a little bit of starstruck. I hear that from time to time, but that happens on my end as well, where I hear people, I get to meet people who are kind of my heroes. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
It's so great to be here. It's great to be here. And I feel like I've had that experience as well, Ginger, with many people that I admire. One thing that's really has heartened me in this work is that I feel as though people who have been pioneers have also been very generous of heart. And so they have been willing to talk with me or collaborate with me or help to inform my work. And that's really remarkable, because in a lot of fields, there's a lot of competition and people are all about themselves, and that's not been my experience in this trauma-informed movement at all. In fact, it's been what I feel like is a unique opportunity and it gives me a lot of hope, because I feel like we can scale the work because people are so open and willing to be generous and share with one another. And I think for that reason, we have a real chance of making major cultural change with this social movement, and it's very exciting.
Absolutely. There's the old saying of we see far because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And people who are truly doing the work know that there's enough work to be done. It really will take every single one of us paddling as hard as we possibly can to make a difference. And that we can paddle harder, stronger, faster, and longer. Did I say longer already? When we're doing it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway. So speaking of the community, another segment that we want to move into here as part of our work is the social media minute. That's how we get connected, both brains and hearts together, and see what other people are doing, because we can really get focused on our own work. But unless we look out across the horizon to see what others are doing, it's hard to continue to grow and change and respond to the learning of others. So Emily, what is it that you're seeing across social media right now that you'd like to talk about? The good, the bad, the ugly, what are you seeing? What would you like to share with us?
So there's a couple of different trends that I feel like I've noticed in recent weeks, even recent months, that on the one hand is very heartening to me and very exciting, and that is what I would call a growing challenge of current day practices. So and it's interesting because this is also related to people coming into the movement and trying to understand, what does trauma-informed really mean? And so on the one hand, I'm very hopeful because I see people challenging the ways in which we've been functioning and operating in schools, and challenging things like PBIS and behaviorism. And also at the same time, I see a lot of folks that maybe are using this as an opportunity to re-edify practices or approaches that have already been around. And that concerns me. So I see both a growing resistance to current practice, which is very heartening, but I also see a lot of folks maybe not quite understanding, or a dilution of what this movement means, because people mistakenly think that all matters related to social emotional well-being or learning are equal and are neurologically informed. So what I mean by that is, there's a lot of things around, like, for example, I spent years teaching Second Step, which is an evidence-based approach to teaching empathy in the classroom. And it's not that approach in and of itself is a problem. It's just that it's not fully informed with what we now understand about how the brain functions and about stress-induced behaviors. So there's been a very strong emphasis in education over the last 20 years, I would say, about this idea that our minds and our intentions and our mindsets can always overpower our reactions. And what I try to help folks understand is, unless we're experiencing a regulated state in our bodies, that we don't have as much control over our behavior as we would like. And that's certainly true for us as adults, but it's especially true with children who've experienced a lot of developmental trauma.
Whew, you just
Sorry,
said
I
a
know I just said a lot.
no, no,
Well,
that's
welcome to me,
great.
Ginger.
You said I knew you were going to be laying down the stuff, and I can't wait to really dig into some of this. I mean, because I agree with you, for better or for worse. And there's a lot of stuff I can't agree because I don't know enough of this, but I certainly don't disagree because I'm not stupid. You know some things that I don't. I'm curious about them.
Yeah. Well, it's
So,
interesting because
I,
I would,
I can't wait to dig in something else.
so I worked for many years as a school counselor. That's sort of where I started, and in elementary schools and in inner city elementary school. And I was super bombarded with just really high toxic stress circumstances. Not me myself personally, but the students that I was supporting and the teachers that were trying to teach essentially. And so I was desperate at that time to really find what would work and what would make a difference. So because of that, and because I sort of remain a curious learner, and even that's true till today, even still today, I tried a lot of different things, and I was trained in a lot of different things, and I got to see the iteration of a lot of different stuff, everything from responsive classroom to PBIS to MTSS to, second step. I mean, just a lot of different renew, check in, check out. I've seen a lot, I've been trained in a lot, I've used a lot. And through that, I really was able to glean through those years of experience in the trenches working with highly dysregulated children and staff. I was able to really see what was making a difference and what wasn't. And so what I find a little frustrating is that there's a reiteration of a lot of that stuff from the past because people weren't doing it then and people weren't understanding the value of it or the value of social emotional well-being in terms of academic progress. And so now we're kind of in this new age where people get it, they're getting it more. They're like, oh, of course, we can't just compartmentalize children and assume that they just come to school and that we're just going to teach. No, we have to actually care about and encourage their social emotional well-being. And so I've just been in this I was in this rare position where that was my job. So I always cared about that. So I had the opportunity to go through a lot of different sort of approaches and practices. And through that gleaned insight that is supported by the research that I read and that I understand. If that makes sense.
It does. So Emily, here's the thing is I would love to spend 4 hours with you really
I
digging
know.
into a lot
And
of
we've
this
got like
stuff and just
5
really
minutes.
opening up that brain so I can see what's happening. But no, I don't worry about that. We'll cut down what we need to, right, Glenn? Anyway, I do have to ask this question though, because you're mentioning these things that I know that schools are saying, I'm at this school, or we do these things, or this is a program that we do, and that. So I'm gonna speak for them who are listening and saying, oh my gosh, she mentioned the thing that we do. And
Right.
we've doubled down recently on this.
Right.
And so I can either choose to say she's full of hooey and never listen to her, or I
Right.
can be curious and say, so then, because we don't have time to dig in, why is it not neurologically informed, as you mentioned? And people can reach out to you and then have those
Absolutely.
conversations, right?
Absolutely.
And
Oh my
find
gosh,
that.
absolutely. And to be honest with you, Ginger, right now, the position that I take and the perspective that I approach the work and when I work with clients, school districts, whatnot, the truth of the matter is it's extremely challenging to our current paradigms, to our current practices. And it's not just in education, it's across all, basically public serving sectors. But, I think that there I think that I try to usually slow it down and help people kind of go inward when I bring this perspective, because many of us have been raised with this way of thinking about human behavior, which is essentially that we are in control of ourselves and that we are making conscious choices, and that when we don't, it's because we're being selfish or we're being impulsive, or, there's been a lot of, historically up to this point, there's been a lot of, quite frankly, shaming and blaming associated with human misbehavior. And so I sort of, when I come into a training situation, I try to like hit the pause button for folks and say, like, let's think about this. When you find yourself really dysregulated, when I say that a lot of human behavior is actually not consciously chosen, when I want you to notice what you experience when I say that. What is coming up for you, and can you kind of befriend that dysregulation and that activation? And that's because that visceral response we have to ideas that challenge us, they're the threat response. It's normal. I mean, when we think we've been doing the best that we can be doing, and we later find out that actually the best we can be doing is maybe not been helpful, that's hurtful. Frankly, it's hurtful, and it's a journey that we have to go on personally. And I'm among this, by the way. It's not like I didn't subscribe to functional behavior analysis and all of those things, and trying to really incentivize or dissuade children from doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. I too was a part of this way of working, and so I've had to go on my own personal journey of coming to recognition and reconciling the fact that I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had. But now, how do I come to the place, and how do I help other people come to the place of, we can do better because we understand more now? And so it's not about persecuting ourselves or vilifying others. It's about compassion for ourselves first, and understanding that we don't know what we don't know. You know what I mean? So it's this work is very deep transformational work, I believe. And I believe that it does, for many of us, start with us individually. And being able to shift our culture won't happen in the absence of individual transformation. So I do take a very sort of educator-centric approach to helping people become trauma-informed. And to also reflect on, like, what's this journey been for you as an educator? Because your jobs, our jobs as educators, could not be more stressful than they are currently. They just couldn't. They, in my opinion, they are among the hardest job to do well, just across all fields and industries and whatnot. Being a teacher, being an educator, being a counselor in schools, whatever it is, being a principal, that is the most heart overwhelming work there is, good and bad.
So, Emily, I want to ask you this question to voice for the educators who might be a little shocked with you naming some of the systems they may be using or believing in.
Right.
So I'm gonna voice this for them, and then I'm gonna ask that you answer it as simply as the question is, if possible. If possible.
Sure. I know.
So, if these others aren't neurologically informed, how can I tell if the program that my community is starting to look at to buy into, how can I tell if it's good?
God, that's an excellent question, Ginger. I would say that there is a body of researchers that have come to this understanding about how the brain functions. And if folks are not seeing that the approach that they have taken, if they look at like and I don't want to necessarily name out, I know I did already, but I don't want to necessarily like throw anybody's approach under the bus per se. But what I would encourage is that folks look at what is the research basis for this particular approach. And what people are going to find is a lot of stuff is based in research from, frankly, the 50s and the 60s, when behaviorism was in a huge resurgence. And not only that, but in the explosion of autism spectrum disorders in the early part of the late 90s and the early part of the 2000s, ABA, applied behavioral analysis, became sort of the gold star of intervention. And so things that are newer have a lot, again, are very much informed by that body of work. And so if people are seeing that, if people are seeing that the research that the approach is based in is old and it doesn't contain some of the major pioneers or thought leaders in traumatology, whether that's Bessel van der Kolk, Stephen Porges, Peter Levine, Ed Tronick, I mean, there's a lot of them, and people can find more information on my website. But if they're not finding that this approach is informed by those individuals and their research, then they have to recognize that they are not doing anything that is new. And this field is a field of emergent application, because the neuroscience is so new and still emerging that there isn't any approach that's been around 20 years unless it's taken a major it's been majorly modified in some way. I guess I would just say that I'm not aware of any approach that is truly trauma informed and neurologically informed that was developed 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Sorry, that wasn't very concise. That wasn't very short.
No, that's okay. If I can put it into a nutshell, perhaps if it's a program, it might not be what we're looking for.
Absolutely, because
something we can buy off the shelf.
Well, yeah. Exactly. I mean, well, that's with the exception of I am getting ready to release my regulated classroom in a program form. But yeah, I think people really need to be looking at what is stuff that has been published in the last 5 years, say. And the truth of the matter is we're in this conflict right now where a lot of schools believe that they have to have evidence-based programming in order to, support social emotional learning, or their funding requires that. And the truth of the matter is that these approaches aren't going to have an evidence base. The newer stuff that's emerging, or things like my regulated classroom, they're not evidence-based, they're evidence-informed. And there is a difference, and the fields are shifting to understand that we want actually evidence-informed stuff, because an evidence-based requires years of research, lots of different kinds of research. And so you're just not going to get, a neurologically informed evidence-based approach because there hasn't been enough time yet, if that makes sense. So
I'm writing that down. That's
you're writing it down? I love it. I know, I'm like challenging like 200 things. Yeah, evidence informed. Yeah, very important. And people don't necessarily aren't aware of that yet, or yeah.
Yes, I love it. So we have absolutely run out of time, and our segments have all fallen apart. But I don't care, and because you're giving us such important things, that I think it's important to hear the important things and new ways of thinking about. And you listed out a list of great researchers that I want people to dive in and to look at. And you're exactly right. That is all on your website, is the hererightnow.org. So it's here as in H-E-R-E.
It's here.
It's actually now. Oh my gosh, you're right. Hear this now. I turned my over. You're right.
Okay.
Oh my
gosh.
That's
okay. It's totally fine.
Right.
HearThisNow.org. Yeah, there's a resource
that's there. In person. I've never interviewed anybody ever before.
You're great at it, Ginger, actually. You're a natural. Like, you should be on TV. But no, seriously, you are. But yeah, so if folks go there, there's a bunch of, not only is there a list of books and stuff, but there's also a lot of links to podcasts and to audiobooks and to interviews. It's definitely not the complete list of resources, but it is a great place for folks to start. And I just think it's really, really important for people, if they're interested in being trauma informed in schools, they really need to look at what has the clinical community, meaning the mental health and behavioral health traumatology community, been looking at and understanding about trauma. And that's why I started Hear This Now, is because I was trying to bridge that chasm of understanding from the clinical community to the educational setting and to educational settings, because a lot of times education's not necessarily informed by psychology or the most recent findings in psychology. And so, and there's a lot of really valuable information in that field of research. So that's what I've tried to do and continue to try to do, is make that bridge so that it's applicable and accessible for educators to understand what are some of the principles of therapeutic healing. And that doesn't mean that I teach teachers to do therapy. It means that I help teachers and educators and counselors in schools understand what are the principles of trauma, neurologically informed treatment that can be translated appropriately in an educational setting. And there's a lot. There is a lot. So it's you know, the answer isn't therapy for
Yeah.
everybody. The answer
I'm so glad
is,
that you shared that all about your website.
yeah, yeah. Sorry. I just
I'm so sorry. We got
no.
a lag here, y'all. I
Oh,
promise.
we do.
Okay. You're doing great. You're doing great. I know that one of our last segments is the Hope Spotlight, where we put a spotlight on a person or a resource. And my plan was absolutely to put that spotlight on your website, which is a wealth of information and resources and access to your brain, where people can ask you questions, and your contact information and everything at the hearthisnow.org. So I'm glad that you did it, because you're better at spotlighting it. There's one piece on your website that really struck me, where it is mentioned that the trauma-informed movement is the civil rights movement of our time. And I thought, yeah, this is big, and it's not easy, and it's complicated,
Yeah.
and it's important. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you have that written down here. Emily,
Well,
thank
I
you
did.
so much for being with us today.
It was great, Ginger. And honestly, I would love to talk more at some point. I really would. It'd be great.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to have you back again. I don't know if the rest of the team sees this and I didn't do such a bad job. Maybe they'll have you back. If I did do a bad job, they'll have you back and do a better job with you. So
No, you were
I'm
great.
so thankful and grateful that you've been able to be here. If there's a question that I'm still pondering, of course, is I can't wait to dig into the traumatology, as you put it. You said that word, and I thought, yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's the study of trauma. I want to dig into that more, and the thoughts of the shifting from everything we've been taught, experienced oftentimes as kids, and then taught in teacher school. And me, with my background in special education, doubled down on behavior supports through behaviorism. I think that's a delicious place to look at for personal and systemic reflection. It's a big deal. Yeah.
I did.
So, folks, February. So good.
I was just going to say, if folks are interested in reading a little bit more about that, I did publish a blog about it called Toxic Schools Worsening Toxic Stress. And it's about the advent of, or the reemergence of behaviorism, medication, talk therapy, and these ways in which we tried to support students the last 20 years as we saw their conditions worsening and their behaviors in schools worsening. And so people are interested in that. It's on my blog, and they can check it out there. And it's actually represents the first chapter of a book that I am writing about my experiences as an educator and my journey to becoming trauma informed.
That's huge. Toxic schools worsening toxic stress. That is a great blog post that I do recommend people take a look at. And if we're looking at that continuum of becoming trauma informed, is we start with being just trauma aware, and then becoming trauma sensitive and trauma informed. But there is a pre-awareness, which is the trauma inducing. Accidentally, it's not like we're trying to make people's lives harder, but the system's not necessarily set up in a way that's healthy for all of us. Yeah. Again, thank you so much, folks. I want to let you know, we're going to replay this. So if you caught it halfway through live, we're going to be doing a live watch party this coming Sunday, whatever the date is. That's today's the 8th. So it's the next Sunday. We'll be doing it live in the evening. So you can watch us there and comment live and be part of the community. Otherwise, it will be out in the world, shared after that. But our next episode will go live February 12th. And I'm sure there'll be several of us back home together doing this. And I can't wait to see how it goes, because I'm just happy to talk to you. And this is where I am. I'm here. I'm at this than I'm right now with you. Okay.
Great.
Thanks a lot, everybody. And Emily, have a great day.
Thanks, Ginger. You too.